Hi there, fans of professional skateboarding and motocross. No, I'm just kidding you. I'm not changing this to a professional skateboarding and motocross page. It's me, it's Brad, your old Buddhist pal. Look, I'm waving my arms. People complain that I wave my arms on these, but I feel like it needs some kind of visual interest, you know? So waving my arms is about all the production values I can give you. So, there's been all this stuff about Noah Levine, and I've written a bunch of stuff on my blog about it, and you can go there and read those things. One of the questions that has come up about every time one of these scandals breaks is they go, well, how can this happen? How can these Buddhists, who are supposed to be good, how can they do these shitty things? And there's a lot of answers that get floated around in the literature and on the interwebs. And one of the answers that comes up that I especially get annoyed by is the one that says there's something wrong with Buddhism, and then the writer or the speaker proceeds to detail what they think is wrong with Buddhism. But it's because of this and this and this aspects of Buddhism. And I don't think it has anything to do with Buddhism, not per se. It's not a Buddhist problem. Because if you kind of look in the world of Buddhist teachers that are out there, most of them are not getting into sex scandals and drug scandals and money scandals and things. They're mostly just people working in their little communities, doing their thing, and they get by fine. Most of it is fine. I think what the problem is with famous religious people. I think becoming a famous spiritual celebrity, or a dharma-lebrity, as I heard Noah has been called, I think that's where the problem is. And being somebody who has a little bit of experience in that area, I thought I'd tell you my theories as to why. Now, I already put a bunch of these theories into a book that I wrote, was it like 10 years ago, or almost 10 years ago now, called Zen Wrapped in Karma, Dipped in Chocolate. This book is really confessional, and it's so raw for me that I don't even have a copy of it in the house. I've done audiobooks for every Buddhist book that I've written, but I have not done that one because I don't know if I can take sitting there and reading it out loud. That's how raw that book is to me. A lot of what that book is about is my experience at that time of the phenomenon of being a spiritual celebrity, which has actually gotten more intense in the 10 years since then. So maybe it's time for a follow-up, I don't know. But there's a few things that I've seen that happen. So in no particular order, here they are. One thing is when you're dealing with a famous Buddhist teacher, what you are usually dealing with is a person who doesn't have any real social skills, like who never really developed social skills. And I'm kind of thinking of myself as an example of this, but I think this is a common theme. Like somebody who spent much of their life sitting in a room meditating and getting very introspective and deep into themselves probably wasn't out partying or hanging out or getting to know people or getting to kind of deal with how humans interact with each other. I mean, I'm sure they are to a certain extent. Everybody does. But they're not in the really intense way that probably normal people do. They get a lot of that. So you take somebody like me. I didn't go out most of the time when I was in my 20s and 30s and teens. I spent my time in a room just meditating like this. I spent a lot of time doing that. So consequently, my social skills are somewhat lacking because I'm not a real social kind of guy. So you take a person like that and you thrust them into a position where they have to deal with people all the time, and quite frankly, they don't have any idea how to do that. Now, they might be able to expound the truths that they discovered on this journey of introspection deep into the fathoms of themselves or whatever, but trying to deal with human interaction is something they just don't have in them. And when they become really famous, it gets much, much worse because there's a whole other level of human interaction you have to deal with at any level of fame. And I'm not super famous. Obviously, or I wouldn't be doing this, little video channel here. But I've seen it happen in my own life to this small extent, which I barely am able to manage. I get bothered when I have to go speak to a group or have to deal with a group. I know how to put on a kind of a face and kind of be an entertainer with it, but once the sort of formatted interaction is over, once the lecture is done or whatever it is that I'm supposed to do, I just want to get out of there. I want to get out there. I want to get out of that place and hide somewhere. But usually I'm not allowed to, because all these people come in and go, hey Brad, and it gets very uncomfortable for me. And I manage it, but it's not easy. So I think that's one reason why things go wrong sometimes. The second one I'll talk about, again, these are in no particular order, not in order of importance or anything, is that a lot of times these people not only don't have any social skills, they don't have any romantic skills. Like they don't know how to deal with the opposite sex, or if, in the case of people who are same-sex attracted, they don't even know how to deal with the same sex often. They don't have that set of skills, again, because they probably didn't have much of a dating life before they got thrust into the position of being the famous spiritual guy. They probably, again, spent a lot of their times cloistered in rooms, looking at walls. Maybe they were following restricted social orders wherein they're forced to be celibate or something like that, or not to have those kind of interactions. So they don't know what to do. And then all of a sudden they get into a position where they're kind of free of the original structure that held them together, whatever temple they were in or whatnot. And they're kind of free and out in the open and making their own rules to a great extent, because that's how it usually ends up being. Even though there might be some overall kind of Buddhist order rules, once you kind of get out in the hinterlands and nobody's really monitoring you, you're kind of free to do what you want. So they get out there, and then they're famous, and suddenly they've become attractive. This is something they're not used to, because their entire lives they've been the unattractive person, the person who was just dour and sullen and didn't have any money or anything to offer, and nobody wants to date that guy or that girl, but a lot of these are men, but so that's the perspective I'm taking. And all of a sudden there's all these people who are attracted to them, who want them, and they've never had this before. And usually they're at an age of where they're still, everything's still working down there, and they're kind of like, I never had a chance to get a piece of this before. Let me see what I can do with that. I think that happens to a lot of people, and I'm not trying to excuse it, but they don't know what to do with it. They don't know how to interact with people, and so they end up interacting with them badly. And again, I'll say it again, even though I just said it 10 seconds ago, this is not an excuse. It's an explanation, and I've been asked to explain, so I'm trying to explain it a little. And this is one reason I think this stuff happens. Now, the last reason I want to talk about, and maybe this is the one that's kind of more significant than the others, is this demand of perfection. There's an interesting thing that happens when you transfer Buddhism from the countries where it grew up to countries where the understanding of religion is more influenced by Christianity. And there's a nice quote I found in this book I've been reading called American Jesus, just about how Americans do Jesus. Pretty interesting little book. But it goes into this quote by a guy named, what's his name? Henry Ward Beecher, who was a 19th century Christian theologian in America who wrote a lot of stuff about Jesus. And one of the things he wrote was this: the Parsi, which is a Zoroastrian, the Parsi and the Buddhist believe in a system more than in a person. What Plato taught is more important than who Plato himself was. Not so Christianity. Christianity is faith in Christ. And so we have this model. Our model of the ideal religious person is Christ. And Christ is an impossible model. It's even Jesus was not Christ. I hope I'm not offending any Christians out there, but I think I feel very confident in saying, if you went back in a time machine or something and looked at Jesus's actual life, even he would not be able to live up to the mythology that's grown up around him. So we're looking to this ideal, but we identify this ideal with a person. And I think what happens with a lot of these teachers, and I think this is starting to change, thankfully, but I think what has historically happened is they're seen as Christ figures. You know, the initial group of them, the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi and Swami Prabhupada and some of these people who came over in the 60s, maybe even Joshu Sasaki and Shunryu Suzuki and people like that in the Zen tradition, were kind of trotted out as if they were Christ figures. You know, they were exotic creatures from a far-off land who had done this mystical practice, and they were going to come floating on clouds and tell us all about it. And we're going, oh, look, it's... And then they're expected to live up to that. And the thing that happens, now this is what happens to ordinary sort of run-of-the-mill people like me, for example, or maybe some of these other people, the ones who've gotten in scandals and things, famous Buddhist teachers, is that there's intense scrutiny looking for every flaw that might poke at the Christ image that we have of them. And for a lot of people, if the teacher doesn't live up to the Christ image, then they're no good. We're not going to deal with that guy because he's not, you know, I'm only going to deal with Jesus Christ, not anybody lesser than Jesus Christ. They want the embodiment of supreme purity. And that's a lot of pressure. I can tell you one of the ways it manifested in my own life was kind of weird, which is that I am a person who suffered from headaches for pretty much all my life. I remember even being in high school, my freshman year of high school, learning that I had to pack a little thing of aspirin in a piece of foil and put it in my pocket because I would just get struck with these massive monster headaches. And it goes on to this day. But I remember after Hardcore Zen had come out and I had a blog and maybe Sit Down and Shut Up had come out too, you know, I was still having these headaches and I was still thinking of things to write about. And every time the kind of idea of writing an essay about the headaches came up, I'd be like, no, I can't do that because I can't reveal to people this imperfection, this flaw that I have, because it'll ruin the whole deal. You know, I can't let people know I have this flaw. And that's a kind of a mundane and easy version of it, but it gets a lot worse. So you're constantly aware that there are people all around you looking at you, like looking and trying to find the flaw and, you know, trying to, where is it? What's the thing he's going to do that's going to be bad? And I think this builds up a lot of psychological pressure. And here's my theory. This is my pet psychological theory that I have no documented support or evidence for at all. Just completely anecdotal from my own mind. But here's what I think happens. I think what happens is that people get... This is oppressive to the person who's involved with it, like really oppressive. And somewhere subconsciously, usually not transferred toward the conscious mind at all, is this desire to get out of it. I want to be free from this intense scrutiny, from having to live up to this impossible Christ image. So I think what a lot of people do is they start undercutting that. You know, they'll do things in secret with this hope that they can't even acknowledge that they'll get caught. You know, hoping that one of these days, one of these little bad things that they're doing here and there is going to find its way to the public, and then it's going to explode, and yeah, it'll be all tragic, and people will be crying, and, you know, whatnot, and there'll be a tearful apology on the internet or whatever, but it gets them free. It gets them free of it, and they don't have to be that anymore. And I think that's what a lot of people are doing, and if they understood that, they might be less inclined to do those things. And by the way, I've caught myself doing those things, just FYI, and most of them are in that book that I just mentioned, if you want to read about them. So there you have it. Those are my theories of why these teachers go wrong. Again, I'm not trying to excuse it. I'm trying to explain it. There's a difference between explaining a phenomenon and then saying, yeah, it's all right because I have explained it. I don't think this makes it right. I just think this helps try to frame it in something where you can understand possibly why it happens. And from understanding why it happens, maybe we can move forward to a way of making so it doesn't have to happen. I don't know. So there you go. If you want to help me hide my psychological flaws and stuff and whatever and just support me, there's Patreon and PayPal links below. That's how I make my living. That's my only real means of support. I get a bit from book royalties, I get a bit more from audiobook royalties, I get a little bit from retreat fees and stuff, but the vast bulk of my income and my ability to buy eggs to fry up for dinner is from you guys donating to Patreon and PayPal, and that is great. Thank you very much. See you next time. Bye.